Welcome to Photo Active, a podcast about photography in the Apple ecosystem. I'm Kirk McElhern.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
This episode is brought to you by Masters of Photography, online masterclasses with the greatest photographers in the world. We'll have a special offer for you on Masters of Photography courses later in the show. This week, we're very happy to welcome our special guest, Mason Marsh. Mason is a photographer, journalist, teacher, and other things. Mason, hi, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Jeff recommended that we get Mason on the show because apparently you are an expert in tripods. And tripods are one of those things that every photographer owns 6 of.
And actually, I'm going to add to that. He's not just an expert in tripods, he's slightly obsessed. So Mason and I have known each other for years, and I figured, okay, a tripod is a tripod. It's got 3 legs, it holds a camera, big whoop. And then, I think I said that at one point to Mason, and he rolled his eyes and was just like, oh, you have no idea, young neophyte. Because, if you have looked into buying a tripod, suddenly there are so many options, and there are different materials, and there are heads and plates and maintenance, and it becomes really overwhelming unless you're just going to get like a $12 drugstore special kind of a thing. So
they sell tripods in drugstores where you live?
They probably do. And so when the topic came up, I was like, okay, we need somebody who really knows his stuff and is willing to geek out on it, because it's just one of those essential things that can be a mystery.
Yeah, and I think many photographers have more than one tripod because they bought one and it didn't do what they wanted, and then they bought another and they didn't get around to selling the first one on eBay. I picked a tripod as my snapshot pick a few episodes ago, and it's actually from the same brand as a previous one I had that I'd bought like a year before, but I realized that it had a feature that I didn't have in the other. And this is the ability to bring the central thing up all the way and then lean it over. I like to do macro photography, and it's a lot more comfortable to do it like that than to try and get it down on the ground or to lean over. But after I got this, I realized there's probably lots of other features, not even discussing the weight of the tripod. I don't go hiking, so I don't need carbon fiber. But where do we start with tripods? I mean, at the simplest level, I guess you can start with a monopod, can't you? That's probably the first place to consider.
No. The entire purpose of a tripod is to be rock solid. If it's not rock solid, you might as well just hold your camera and save yourself the money and the carrying around a big bulky tripod. Monopods are great if you're using. The only time I advocate using a monopod is one, if you're shooting video and you need to stabilize your shot a little bit, but you still want to keep somewhat mobile.
So in that case, you wouldn't extend the monopod. You'd keep it as short as possible and just hold it with 2 hands, right?
Or extend it to the ground and use it. I've used them to just keep the shot less bouncy, just touch that foot to the ground and give it that stability. But with video, you're not trying to be rock solid. You're just trying not to be shaky most of the time. And then if you're using a long lens, you're shooting sports or wildlife or something like that, and you don't want to hold that lens in your hand all day because it's going to break your arm. Then you can throw a monopod on it. Otherwise, I have a monopod. I don't really know where it is. I just use it so infrequently. Tripods need to be rock solid. And so going back to what Jeff said earlier, when I meet a photographer, especially landscape photographers, and I do 2 things. I look at their shoes and I look at their tripod, because I judge people by their shoes and their tripods, because that's how we interact with the earth. And it sounds sort of hippy-dippy, but the truth is, if you're not wearing good shoes, you're not walking far. And if you're not using a solid tripod, you're not taking sharp photos, and you're not really in it for the quality, you're maybe in it for another reason.
Okay, I'm just going to push back a little bit on the monopod. I have a bit of a tremor. So using a monopod for me, if I'm down at a low shutter speed, say 1/60th or something like that, it makes a big difference. And if I really need more stability, I can lean against a tree or a wall or something. I use a monopod because I don't want to carry a tripod. I don't do the kind of landscape photography where I'm hiking into the mountains and settling down for hours. So it's good to have a monopod just to provide some additional stability. I use Fujifilm cameras that don't have image stabilizations. I do have one Fujifilm zoom lens that has image stabilization. But for me, that additional stabilization is worth being a tripod heretic or blasphemer.
Well, I will say too that monopods are incredibly easy to use. I mean, there isn't much to them. They're easy to carry. You can usually use it as a walking stick if you're not going to be using it as a monopod. And so
fight
for
off
the reason you're talking about,
tigers. Mm-hmm. You can fight off saber-toothed tigers as well.
Well, sure. Yeah, and you don't want to be swinging around $1,000 tripod.
Exactly.
To fight off a saber-toothed tiger, you use your $50 monopod for that.
Oh, I think I paid 16 pounds. It's an Amazon Basics model.
Oh, that's good. Even better.
Actually, if you want to go really basic, I saw something interesting. What's the thing where you take a piece of string and you tie it to a piece of wood and you step on it and you hold it up, and that kind of the tension of you pulling against the string stabilizes the camera a bit.
Yeah. There's lots of techniques that I've used to stabilize in talking about image stabilization. Now with in-body stabilization and in-lens stabilization, we really can handhold down to very low shutter speeds successfully. And so I think tricks like the string thing, I've seen people carrying those around. I haven't seen people pulling off anything longer than what they probably could have pulled off using just their hands as far as the shutter speed. So, when I break out the tripod, I'm doing it for two reasons. One is to get a longer exposure than I can handhold, or I'm doing some sort of panorama, and I want to have a consistent ability to pan across.
I think this brings up an important point, which is a lot of this is very situational, because you both just described maybe 4 or 5 different shooting situations where having that stability is helpful, definitely, but maybe you're more on the move. Maybe you're hiking, maybe you're wandering through an arboretum or a flower show or something like that, where you may not even be able to bring in a full tripod. Like some museums and stuff will let you bring in a monopod, sure, and so that might be your only option. So my question here is, a lot of people will just say, okay, I went and I bought a tripod. I have a tripod and I can use it everywhere, but that's really not the case. I learned this with my first tripod, which is a big hulking Manfrotto it's great. It's super stable. It's super heavy. And so I would never carry it around any long distance. It's great for throwing in the back of a car or a van and pulling it out when you get to your destination, and there you go.
And using to shoot a feature film, for example.
Yes, I do that so often.
So where do you begin with a tripod? Let's start with the simplest tripod that's worth getting.
That's a great question, because that's the one I get the most. It's one of those buy once, cry once situations. And you said earlier, Kirk, that most photographers have 5 or 6 tripods, and I'm definitely guilty of that. I've bought a lot of tripods until I found the right one. And so I always recommend that people find the best tripod that they can afford and then get the next higher one up. And it's tough advice to give, because a lot of people go, oh, well, I'm just not going to do it then. But I've had so many friends and workshop clients come great distances to a once-in-a-lifetime location, and they come away with images that aren't as good as they should be because their tripod wasn't stable, or their tripod malfunctioned or just straight up fell apart. I don't know how many hours I've spent on the side of a road somewhere with a Leatherman trying to fix somebody's tripod. And so I really think that quality comes down to the number one thing. It's got to be really well made. And luckily for us, things are getting better in photography. You have to really work hard to find stuff that's super duper crappy and cheap.
But you said tripods that aren't stable. Are there really tripods that aren't stable?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not talking about $10 tripods, but if you're buying something, I don't know, let's say $100, £100, I would expect it to be stable.
Yeah, I would too, when you get up into that range. But unfortunately, people want things that are lightweight and they want things that fold up really small. And so the more leg sections you have, the more articulation a tripod has. The lighter the material, so carbon fiber is real popular for tripods. If it's a lightweight tubing, it'll have a lot of flex to it. Carbon fiber is incredibly flexible. And I've had really good, very expensive tripods that if you grab the top of the tripod where the legs come together, I call it the pelvis of the tripod, right? If you grab the pelvis of the tripod and you twist it when the tripod's fully set up, if you can twist that, any wind hitting your lens, any kind of movement is going to cause that to move. So my test for a tripod, if I'm going to be doing, long exposure, critical sharpness kind of stuff like astrophotography, things like that, is you need to be able to set that tripod up at the height that's comfortable for you to stand behind it or sit behind it if you want to do that. And then you need to be able to grab that with all your strength and twist it. And if it moves, it's not solid. So for me, that gets you way up there in price to get to those tripods that are really solid. Or you can find more affordable tripods that meet those requirements, but they're super heavy and they're harder to carry around.
Okay, so I'm looking, I have a Vanguard Alta Pro something, and I'm looking at the Vanguard website, the price is in pounds. The most expensive tripod they have is 400 pounds. I think the one I got was about 130, but it was like 20 pounds off on sale. So you were saying earlier about $1,000 tripod, $1,000 tripod. What would be because if you think about it, 400 pounds is the cost of 4 different tripods that you've bought trying to get the right tripod at 100 or 150 or 200, and it'll save a couple of steps. It's the cost of a lens. It's not that expensive. So is the best thing to just go at that price range? And then you'll explain later why, some of them are even more expensive than that.
Right. Well, Jeff was in the situation this year where he wanted to go on a trip and have a better tripod to travel with and to carry around. And so he had a very specific set of requirements. He wanted something that he could hike with that would be stable. And so I pointed him towards Three-Legged Thing, which is a wonderful British company.
That's the little portable, really small pocket-sized tripod, right?
No, they actually make a really wild range of tripods, and now they make L brackets and really nice tripod heads.
Right.
They're really an innovative company. But their tripods, some of them are very compact. They fold up to 12 inches long, and you can put them in your side pocket of your pack. Unfortunately, those tripods, to get to a standing height where you can stand comfortably behind it for any length of time, they do get a little wobbly. But if you can keep them down a little bit, and thanks to articulating screens, that's really changed how I use tripods. I don't have to have my tripod at my eye height anymore. I can have it down at belly height and look at my screen. And that makes it a lot more stable, and it can make a lot smaller tripod, which is obviously easier and cheaper. So Jeff had this specific set of circumstances, and I said, well, it's a series of compromises, but I would go look at this tripod. And I point him to one of their larger tripods. And I think that's the one you ended up getting, Jeff. And it really is a good compromise between compact, easy to carry, and stable.
Yeah, so I ended up getting the Three-Legged Thing Punks Cori Mag Alloy Tripod Kit, and it also had a head on it. So it's not carbon fiber, so it wasn't super expensive. It cost me about $200, but it was compact enough that I could put it on the side of my Peak Design backpack, and I went hiking with it. I carried it with me almost everywhere when I was in Hawaii. That was for this trip, and it is not as stable as my other big, massive one, but it was absolutely fine and stable enough for what I paid for it and what I needed it for.
It looks like, I'm looking on their website, we'll link to this in the show notes, it looks like their most expensive tripod is 400 pounds as well. And this is the Albert Carbon Fiber Tripod System and Airhead 360.
Yeah, and what I would recommend people do, Kirk, when you get to a site like Three-Legged Thing or Vanguard or any of these companies that we're talking about, look at if they do make carbon fiber and some sort of alloy tripod. Look at the specs of those tripods side by side. Most of a tripod is not the leg, the weight of the tripod fittings, and we can get to that, what kind of fittings you want on the legs, the pelvis or the spider, that top part where everything hooks together, and the head. If you look at the specs together, you'll see that a lot of times the alloy ones aren't that much heavier, and they're much more stable, and they're a lot cheaper.
Yeah, more stable. And that's interesting because carbon fiber is basically for the weight, but it's a lot more flexible because if you extend the legs all the way, there's a lot of pressure going on the legs to make them sort of bend inwards. And the carbon fiber is also more fragile. I don't know if it would break if you dropped it on a rock or something, but I know that carbon fiber is not as sturdy as aluminum, for example.
Yeah, both have their weaknesses. If you drop them on rocks, you could kink a metal tubing just as easily as crack a carbon fiber leg. But most people don't break their tripods dropping them. Most people break them when the legs are fully extended and they fall on them. They stumble and trip and
it's because they have the wrong shoes.
And a carbon fiber leg is just going to fold up.
Okay, let's take a break and come back. And I want to talk more about the different parts of the tripod learning platform that brings together some of the world's most acclaimed photographers, the masters. You can enjoy an unprecedented insight into the way these photographers work during intimate lessons that capture their knowledge, ethos, and philosophy. I've taken the Masters of Photography course with Joel Meyerowitz, one of my favorite photographers, and I was impressed by his passion for photography and his desire to transmit his knowledge to others. With more than 5 hours of video and 34 lessons, Joel Meyerowitz discusses technique, inspiration, and his career, and gives some practical tips about shooting in the street, taking portraits, and even still life photography. I strongly recommend this course with Joel Meyerowitz, and Masters of Photography has a special offer for PhotoActive listeners. Get 5% off any course with the code PhotoActive. Go to mastersof.photography and enter the coupon code PhotoActive or use the link in our show notes. That's mastersof.photography. I really enjoyed this course, and I think you will too. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the different elements that make up the tripod. The legs, they extend usually in 3 parts, sometimes more. There's the ball head or whatever the head is. There's a swiveling bit that goes on the pelvis. But I'm looking at a Vanguard tripod that has a pistol grip ball head. What is that about?
Yeah, Manfrotto used to make a pistol grip. I don't know if they still do, make a pistol grip head. That's really back in the day when everyone had what was called a pan tilt head, which had a different knob for every axis that you wanted to adjust. And the idea of having a ball that you could just grab and reposition and then release the handle and it would lock was pretty revolutionary. But unfortunately, pistol grips add a lot of height and a lot of length to the tripod. You do have to consider how much weight and dimension the head adds to the tripod package. And so I would certainly recommend people walk away from those pistol grip heads. I think a simple ball head with a tensioning knob that locks it down. And then there's usually another knob that controls the panning ability of the head, and then another knob that controls the tension of the spring that pushes on the ball. So what you want to be able to do is release the tension without flopping over and letting your camera crash over.
And this is particularly important if you have a very long lens on it, like you're out shooting pictures of birds or something like that.
Absolutely. And so, I think ball heads are the way to go. They're incredibly strong, incredibly stable, and they're simple. Anything tripod wise, any machine really, the more simple and elegant it is, the longer it's going to last, the easier it's going to be to maintain. And the easier it's going to be when you're tired out early in the morning or late at night trying to make photographs. I mean, we want our tripods not to fight with us. And so when I look at a tripod, I put my hands on a tripod. I want it to feel intuitive and not have me scratching my head going, what is this for? That's what the Sony menu system's for, right? To keep us puzzled. The tripod should be simple. So I'm a big fan of twist locks on the legs and simple 3-knob ball heads, and you just keep it simple, strong, and elegant. That's perfect in my world.
So this pistol grip the picture is showing a wire connecting from the bottom of the pistol where the magazine would be to the side of the camera. Essentially, it's got a little trigger so you can take pictures. The only reason I could see that this would be interesting is if it gives you a way to pan. I'm thinking you have a long lens and you're holding the lens in your hand while you're panning and you're holding the pistol, and it might make it easier to pan. But I can't see this working well if you're shooting with a 50 millimeter lens.
Well, and if you're shooting with a long lens and you're panning, you would just loosen the pan knob on your ball head and have your hands on your camera and just pan using the tripod as a vertical stabilization, not a horizontal stabilization. And so
this is basically a toy.
Yeah.
I've seen people shooting video make better use of like the extended arm that, for panning and stuff. Like that seems to make more sense.
Yeah, for a video head, you want a fluid head. And so that arm that you're talking about, Jeff, what that does is it gives you purchase and allows you to do a smooth pan without it jerking. So if you take a normal tripod head and you try to pan while you're shooting video, especially if you're zoomed in at all, you're going to notice that it sort of has fits and starts as it pans. With a video specific fluid head, it's dampened, and so as you pan, it's really smooth, and the handle makes that process really easy. I was actually taught many decades ago when I worked in video that the best way to pan a fluid head is to actually grab it around the head with both hands and just slowly move your body to the side, just twist it.
Keep your arm straight and let your body do the leverage. Yeah.
That way you're not introducing any kind of quick movements.
Well, again, and I'm not picking on Vanguard here because I think they're necessarily better. It's just that I happen to have one of theirs. I have selected their Alta Pro 2 Plus line, of which there are 10 models, and they have 4 head types. Well, they have under the head type, it says ball head, grip head, pan head, and without head. So they sell some without heads. So we saw the grip head. You talked about the ball head, and you just mentioned the pan head. Why would you buy one without a head? Because would you buy a separate head to put on a tripod? Because it has some special features that you don't get in a head with a tripod. Yeah.
The tripod and the head are 2 separate purchases, I think. I'm always leery of tripods, and Three-Legged Thing actually does a pretty good job of matching tripods to heads. But a lot of times people will spend a lot of money on the legs because they want carbon fiber, they want something that's sexy, right? And so they spend a lot of money on the heads, and then they skimp on the head because they figure, it's just something I attach my camera to. The truth is the head does the work, and I think that's where you should invest more of your money is in the ball head. You really want a very solidly built, stable head. Everybody that I've had actually have tripod failure where they actually had to throw the tripod away has always been in the head. Usually you can fix a leg, but when a tripod head goes south, it's hard to get it to work again. And so getting a good solid ball head is critical, and that's usually a separate purchase. So
this sounds a lot like buying an espresso machine, because people get really focused on spending a lot of money on an espresso machine, but the better way to do it, if you want good espresso, is you spend more money on the grinder than the espresso machine. You can have a half-decent espresso machine, but if you have a really good grinder, you'll get better coffee. And I think this is also one of the things that people don't realize when they start looking for a tripod, because they're thinking legs, they're thinking materials. And, when I first went looking for a tripod ages ago, it was a shock to me that I was like, wait, I need to pick out a head and a tripod leg. And so I think that confuses people, and so they will go with something where it's a bundled deal and they may not know if the head is any good.
Well, and nowadays we have a lot of other options where we can use our tripod heads aside from the legs. Platypod or Platypod, however you want to say that, is a wonderful product. It's basically a metal plate with a stud on it, and you can screw your tripod head onto it and take it into places where they won't allow tripods. And you essentially get the benefits of a tripod, but you set it on a table or a railing or something like that. There are clamps. Really Right Stuff makes a wonderful clamp that has a stud on it that you could screw a tripod head onto. that opens up a lot of areas. So, Kirk, you said you were a macro photographer. There are a lot of ground level tripods that are just short, little stubby legs, incredibly stable. And you put your normal ball head on there, and you're down at flower level, you're down at plant level, and it makes macro photography much, much easier. So, yeah, I really encourage people to think of the head as a separate purchase because you are going to use it in other places. And there are good chances that at some point you're not going to like your legs anymore. You're either going to damage them or you're going to decide that you didn't buy the right set of legs. But if you got the right head, you unscrew it, sell the legs on eBay, grab a new set of legs and screw that head on there, and that head will last you a long time.
Or like in my situation where I could use the same head if I'm going to be hiking, traveling, and need something compact and light, or if I'm just going to be out on a driving workshop somewhere where I park and go to some great vista that's not that far away.
Yeah, I have 3 different tripods I use given the situation. So if I'm going to be car or van based, I'll carry my big monster Gitzo tripod, which I adore. It stretches out to 7 feet tall, and I can set it up on any kind of terrain and have a rock solid stable surface, but I don't want to carry that thing around. So I'll put my ball head on that set of legs if I'm car based. If I'm going to be walking, I will use Really Right Stuff small travel tripod, which is sort of a mid-sized tripod, but also incredibly stable. But it only goes to about mid-torso height. It doesn't get very tall. And then if I'm going somewhere where I can't or I don't want to carry a tripod, I'll either carry a tabletop tripod or a clamp and a small ball head, or even my full-size ball head on a platypod. And I'll just put that in my bag and go walking around. And for city stuff, street photography, a lot of people that go out and do street photography, they forget or they don't want to carry a tripod or they don't want to look like a photographer, so they don't want to have that big tripod set up. But there are situations in cities where a long exposure would be really amazing. And you're not going to be able to pull that off hand holding or setting it on a table necessarily. But if you can set it on a ball head and set that on something that would give you that stability, you can get some amazing shots without carrying a tripod at all.
Now, does this also include like gorilla pods, or is that something that is in the same class, or they happen to have 3 legs?
Gorilla pods are really cool if you're riding around on a motorized skateboard. And even then, if anybody that's ever owned a gorilla pod, I would say that gorilla pods are sort of like drones, and that 90% of the gorilla pods purchased, 90% of the drones that are purchased are not used anymore because they didn't turn out the way that people thought they would. I have a gorilla pod. It's downstairs in my basement in a box. They tend to, you set them up and you put your camera on them, and then you can sit there and watch the whole thing slowly lean.
If you're shooting with a big lens, obviously that's going to happen. I've done that with my Fuji X Pro 2 and a normal lens, and I don't have a problem. I think one good thing about a gorilla pod is if you're not planning to go out and take fancy photographs, but you're in your car and you stop someplace and you want to take a picture, you can put it on the roof of the car and you can get a nice stable picture. I know there are other solutions for cars. There are grips that you can put on a window and things like that. But the Gorilla Pod is the kind of thing you can carry when you don't think you're going to need a tripod.
That's true. I always have in my camera bag, I'm going to hold it up. I know this is not a video podcast, but I always carry in my camera bag this little tabletop Really Right Stuff tripod. And it's got a simple quarter thread on the top, and I can put a little ball head on there. But I can also just screw this right into the bottom of my camera or into a lume cube or some sort of light source. This is always in my bag. It doesn't weigh much. And I actually use it as a handle if I want to do video. I can put my camera on here and hold it like people do with the Gorilla Pods. I can set on top of a car. It's got little rubber feet. I can set it over things like a beanbag or something to sort of balance it on some uneven surface. And it's not going to fall over. It's not going to creep. The Gorilla Pods, my experience with them, if you have any camera of any size, it's gonna creep on you over time, and that always makes me nervous. I'm a nervous Nelly when it comes to my camera moving.
I want to go back to the heads because I'm on the Vanguard website and I'm looking at things, and the heads range from 150 pounds down to 70 pounds. Why? So you're saying the head is more important than the tripod. Should one buy a tripod and then get a better head if one has already bought a tripod with a head? And what do I look for if I want to get a better head? What is going to be the difference? I mean, the most expensive one here, it says, durable magnesium construction with open body design. Well, I don't know what that means. I mean, magnesium, that's okay. 360-degree panning, well, they generally all do that. 90-degree portrait angle option, that's nothing special. Scratch-free oxidized surface. Okay. But what's special about something like this?
Somewhere in that description is going to be a weight capacity. Hopefully.
18.7 ounce. No, sorry. Load capacity up to 44 pounds.
Okay, 44 pounds. That sounds like a lot, right? You can put a huge camera and lens on that. It's not going to move. You would be surprised at how it's sort of, I don't know if you camp at all, but like sleeping bag temperature ratings, right? This bag's good down to 30 degrees below zero, and you get in it on a 30-degree night and you're freezing. The weight capacity of a tripod head is usually incredibly overstated. And so I always get one that says like that, 45 pounds, 50 pounds. I'm like, man, there's no way I'm putting a 50-pound camera on that. But if you put an SLR or even a mirrorless camera with a 70 to 200 or 100 to 400 on there, that's, it's not nothing. And you do want them to be stable. And what you want is that stability not to creep. And so if you have a ball head that's too small, the ball is really small. And whatever is pushing on that ball inside that head to create the lock, it's going to slide if it's got tension on it. And you don't want that to happen. And so I tend to way overbuy on the ball head. That's something I always try to keep in mind. If I do rent a big lens, I don't have to then rent another tripod or another head. I've got what I need.
So for someone like me who never shoots with big lenses, that would be enough. But if you're potentially going to get a big lens, then that's something to take into account.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Another thing I see that's really interesting is they have something they call a multi-mount, which is a kind of a bar where you put the camera on one side and a flash on the other side. Obviously, that's a very specific usage. But I would guess if you're shooting portraits outdoors, maybe that would be a way to not have a separate stand for a flash or hold it yourself because it allows you to separate the two of them.
Yeah, I always get a little nervous when I see things that are moving the camera off the center of the tripod. The Manfrotto and the Vanguard tripods that tilt, where you pull the center column up and you lean it over like you were mentioning, Kirk. When you take that camera off center, you have to really be careful. And I will say this is a super important tip for anybody that's shooting off of a tripod. When your hands aren't on your camera, you should be a little nervous. Even if you're on a really solid, stable tripod, I always have my camera tethered to my tripod because I have unfastened clamps, that little part of the ball head that connects your camera to the ball head.
Yeah.
I've inadvertently loosened that knob or flipped that lever open and I was adjusting something and forgot to lock it back down. So I always have a tether so that if my camera were to fall, it's not going to fall all the way to the ground. When you move your camera off center, what you risk is that whole thing toppling, and it's hard to tether that.
Yeah, I've seen that. So I use this to shoot photos of things for articles, like hardware, computer hardware. I have a sort of a butcher block in the kitchen, which is an ideal background. And the first time I used this tripod like that with the center rod on an angle so I could be shooting almost directly down, I quickly realized that what you need to do is you need to have two of the three legs in the front, one in the back, and the one in the back much shorter, so that your center of gravity isn't in the front. Because once you lean that center rod out with the camera, that weight's just going to pull it right down. So you do need to pay a lot more attention as to how you're balancing everything. But once it's set up, it's really wonderful.
So, Kirk, let me ask, on your tripod, when that column is tilted over to the side, is there any way for you to suspend your camera bag inside the legs of the tripod? Is there a hook under there or something that you could?
No, but I'm doing this at home. I don't really use a camera bag at home.
I guess what I'm thinking of is
you're saying to add an extra weight. Yeah. like a camera bag or a sandbag. And, if you see a cinema shoot, they'll often have sandbags on the feet of the tripods.
Yeah, and so what I do is I don't want to carry a sandbag or a beanbag around with me in the field. I will use my camera bag. And so a lot of my tripods don't have center columns. I tend not to use them. So my tripods don't have center columns, and they instead have a hook under there. And I have I make sure that my bag will be able to hang from that hook. Especially shooting, for me, I shoot a lot on the beach, on the coast, and it's usually windy. And wind will introduce vibration in your shots if you're shooting at a lower shutter speed. And so by hanging your bag, especially if you can keep the bag from swinging around and banging into the legs of the tripod, by hanging your bag and ballasting that tripod, it's going to stabilize it even more, especially if you've got a carbon fiber tripod that's prone to flexing. So
right.
Before we wrap up, I want to bring up one other point that I had never ever thought of before, and I blame you for this. But the importance of cleaning your tripod, because you use it, you put the legs away, and you forget about it. Can you talk briefly about why I've been so wrong all these years in not cleaning my tripod? I mean, like, do you disassemble your entire tripod if you've been shooting at the beach or what have you?
Not every time. I do it once a year. I do a full disassembly once a year and scrub everything down and make sure there's no corrosion on any of the corrodable parts, and make sure there's no sand or salt crystals inside the mechanisms, because it will wear out over time. And all of my tripods have twist lock legs. And what I mean by twist lock, the ones that go all the way around, you have to grab them and twist them. If you have a flip lock leg, you really have to be careful of making sure that all of your little nuts and screws that hold those things together are tightened and locked down. And so I go through and check all of the screws and parts of my tripod and make sure that they have thread lock compound on them and that they're tightened down. And then I make sure everything's clean once a year. But if I'm out shooting on the beach, I have a simple rule. And this is a tip I give all my clients. Before I go out on the beach, I extend the lower section of my legs all the way, and I lock them. That way I don't set my tripod down in the sand, even if it's just for a second to readjust my bag. I don't set my tripod down in the sand where the fittings are going to get in the sand.
That's a great idea, yeah.
Once I get out and I'm using it and I get salt, I'm usually out in the water, and so I get salt water all over the legs of my tripod. Before I collapse it down, I take it back to the hotel or wherever I'm staying and I just rinse it off with fresh water, let it dry overnight. Usually there's my hotel room has the tripod set up in the middle of the room with all the stuff that got wet draped over it, drying. And in the morning, I collapse it back down and it's good to go. And if I follow those basic precautions, I only have to disassemble it once a year. And that's just to lubricate things and do some general kind of tightening and checking. But if you are out abusing your tripods, you're going to have to increase that more. But you do have to take care of these. These are the part that connects your camera to the earth, and it's going to take the hits, right? It's going to get dirty, it's going to get beat up, and you need to inspect those parts and make sure it's not going to fail on you when you're out in the middle of somewhere trying to get a beautiful shot, and your tripod's, critical for that.
Okay, thank you very much for this, Mason. I'm very glad that you came on the show to tell us all these things that we didn't know that we have to worry about now.
It's my pleasure. It's what I do.
Okay, it's time for our snapshots. What have you got this week, Jeff?
So my snapshot is tripod related. When I bought my three-legged thing tripod, it came with this great little multi-tool. It's called the Three-Legged Thing Tools with a Z multi-tool. And it's basically a little compact tool. It has a little Allen wrench to it. It has a little regular screwdriver screw to it. It has a little carabiner. It even has a bottle opener and a keychain ring so you can clip it anywhere. The reason I like this is, and you can buy it separately. It's like $8 or $7. The reason I like this is that before I used to carry like this old bicycle multi-tool thing because I needed one hex wrench in order to tighten or unscrew sections of my tripod, and it was always way too much. This is small and light and sturdy and cheap. So,
but does it have a corkscrew?
It does not have a corkscrew. Why would you want to? Oh.
Yes, I have a Swiss Army knife in my knapsack all the time, a relatively small one, and the corkscrew is the thing I use the most often.
I guess maybe this is more American because it just assumes that you're going to be drinking beer. But yeah, honestly, I think I'd probably go for the corkscrew. All right, next model, three-legged thing, people.
The European version.
Exactly. Kirk, what do you have for this week?
I've got a bunch of lenses. What I want to talk about is a group of lenses that have a nickname in the Fuji system. Some people call them Fujicrons. Now, if you're familiar with Leica cameras, they have a line of lenses that they called Summicron, and they're f2 lenses, and they're not the most expensive. They're really good quality, etc. Fuji has a similar set of lenses. They have a 23, a 35, and a 50 millimeter f2. They're all weather resistant. They're all relatively small and light, being f2 compared to the f1.4 or other versions of lenses. The Fuji f2 lenses are usually about half the size and weight of the ones with the larger apertures. And the reason I want to talk about this is that these lenses together give you pretty much a complete set of primes. In addition, Fuji is releasing a 16 millimeter f2.8 this week, the week that we're recording. And so that gives you everything. Remember, the Fuji, you multiply the millimeters by 1.5 to get the equivalent, to get the 35 millimeter equivalent focal length. So that goes from 24 millimeters up to 75 millimeters. Now, you could have a single zoom lens that will do all this. It'll be a little bit lighter. It's less fiddly. You don't have to take the lenses on or off. But I'm just a fan of prime lenses, and I like having multiple prime lenses to get a different feeling. I don't like to zoom and keep trying to find it. I like to have the prime lens and compose with the prime lens. So if you have something like this, it gives you a different type of photography than a zoom lens. They're relatively light. You have one on the camera. You put the other 2 or 3 in a little shoulder bag. And you've got all these lenses that cover the main focal lengths you need, unless you're shooting macro or shooting, long distances with birds and all that. Now, obviously, as we've mentioned many times, we both use Fujifilm cameras. I'm sure that for other types of cameras, there are similar types of lenses, relatively inexpensive, not with the huge apertures so that they have lots of background blur, and not huge like some of these lenses can be.
It's been a while since the background has come into the podcast, probably for good reason. Well, as we've talked before, a zoom lens gets you all of that in one package, but there are always trade-offs. You zoom out and you no longer have an f2 lens. You have to stick with f5.6, or if you want it f2 all the way, then you're spending a lot of money and it's huge and heavy. So yeah, I like this approach. This sounds great. I like the few prime lenses that I have.
Okay, well, that's going to be the end of the show. We're recording this just before we change to spring. The season changes to spring, which for me is the season when I go out and start taking more pictures. We've got lots of flowers out there. It's starting to get warmer. It's light later in the day. So wherever you are in the world, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and it's spring, show us some of the photos that you're taking around springtime. Drop them in our Facebook group. We'd love to see them. Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in the show, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or in Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review on iTunes or in your podcast app. Don't forget that you can get 5% off any course at Masters of Photography with the coupon code PHOTOACTIVE. That's PHOTOACTIVE in one word. Until next week, thanks again for listening.